History is not the story we have finished reading, but one we are still trying to decipher. This video will take you on a journey through 25 extraordinary artifacts that challenge everything we think we know about the ancient world. By the end, you will see the past not as a simple timeline, but as a landscape filled with profound and unanswered questions. We will examine objects that suggest lost technologies and maps that hint at forgotten explorers. Each discovery pushes us to reconsider the ingenuity and connections of our ancestors. How comfortable are you with the idea that our history books might be incomplete? The first piece of this puzzle was pulled from the deep, encrusted and silent for 2 millennia. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera discovered the wreck of an ancient Roman cargo ship. Among statues and pottery, they recovered a lump of corroded bronze about the size of a large book. It seemed unremarkable at first, just another piece of debris. But decades later, when researchers carefully cleaned and examined it, they realized this was no ordinary artifact. Inside that calcified mass was an intricate mechanical system of precisely cut bronze gears, arranged in a complex, layered assembly. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, dated to around 100 years before the Common Era. It is a device of breathtaking sophistication. Its dozens of interlocking gears work together to model the motions of the sun, the moon, and the known planets. By turning a hand crank on the side, an operator could advance or rewind time on the device, predicting celestial events like solar eclipses and the positions of stars with remarkable accuracy. It even accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon, a subtlety that requires advanced astronomical understanding. In essence, it was a mechanical computer programmed with the knowledge of the cosmos. The existence of such an object fundamentally disrupts our standard story of technological history. We often think of ancient Greece in terms of philosophy, art, and democracy, not precision engineering. The level of miniaturization and gear design in the mechanism would not be seen again in Europe until the development of sophisticated mechanical clocks in the 14th century. That is a gap of over 1,300 years. This single artifact tells us that a strand of high mechanical art existed in the ancient world, a strand that was somehow severed and lost. It forces us to ask a humbling question. If something this advanced could disappear from the record, what else have we forgotten? What other chapters of human ingenuity are still waiting, silent, at the bottom of some forgotten sea? From the gears of a cosmic calculator, we move to the silent pages of an unreadable book. In the year 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich acquired a strange manuscript from a collection in Italy. What he purchased was not just an old book, but a perfect enigma, bound in vellum and written entirely in a script that has never been seen before or since. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a work that has defied every attempt at translation for over a century. Carbon dating places its creation in the early 15th century, squarely in the medieval period, yet its contents feel utterly alien to our understanding of that time. The pages are a riot of bizarre illustrations. There are hundreds of drawings of plants that do not match any known species on Earth, their roots and leaves twisting in impossible configurations. There are intricate astrological charts featuring unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams. Most curiously, there are sections filled with drawings of nude women bathing in or connected by elaborate networks of tubes and vessels filled with a green, possibly liquid substance. The text itself flows in a graceful, cursive hand, suggesting a real language with consistent grammatical patterns. Yet its alphabet of strange, looping characters corresponds to nothing in the historical record. For decades, the world's top cryptographers, including teams from both world wars who broke complex military codes, have turned their skills to the Voynich. All have failed. The patterns resist every known method of linguistic or cryptographic analysis. This relentless defiance has spawned countless theories. Some argue it is an incredibly elaborate and purposeless hoax from the Renaissance, created to fool a wealthy patron. Others propose it records a lost natural language or a constructed, secret tongue used by a forgotten scholarly or spiritual group. More speculative ideas have suggested it could be a pharmacopoeia detailing the properties of now extinct plants, or even a treatise on aspects of women's health and knowledge that was deliberately obscured. The manuscript's very existence is a profound challenge. It sits in our timeline, a physical object from a known era, yet it communicates absolutely nothing we can comprehend with certainty. It mocks our assumption that we can read the past if we just find the right documents. Here is a document we have in our hands, and we cannot read a single word. What does it say about the medieval world that something this complex and visually rich could be produced and yet leave no other trace in history? Is it a solitary masterpiece of nonsense, or a key to a chamber of knowledge we have not yet found the door to? The Voynich Manuscript does not whisper its secrets, it simply waits. A silent book guards its language, while a simple jar may have held a forgotten spark. In the 1930s, workers excavating for a railway near Baghdad unearthed a collection of seemingly mundane clay jars. One, dating to the Parthian period around 200 years before the Common Era, was different. It was a small vessel about the size of a fist, sealed with a plug of asphalt. Inside, archaeologists found a rolled copper sheet forming a cylinder, and within that, an iron rod. The materials and the careful, insulating seal were deliberate. When a researcher later filled a replica with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, a measurable electric current flowed between the two metals. This was the Baghdad Battery, a device capable of producing a little over 1 volt of electricity. On its own, that is not enough to power a light or a tool, but it is a steady, reliable trickle of energy. The immediate and obvious question is, what was it for? The most compelling theory is electroplating, the process of using electricity to bond a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, onto the surface of a less valuable object like silver or copper. Artisans could have connected several of these jars together to create a stronger current, immersing a piece of jewelry in a chemical solution and using the battery to transfer a fine layer of gold onto it. This would explain the existence of exquisite, ancient gilded objects where the gold coating is mysteriously thin and perfectly bonded, a feat difficult to achieve with mercury-based fire gilding alone. Other suggestions point toward a ceremonial or medicinal use, where the gentle shock could have been part of a spiritual experience or an early attempt at therapeutic treatment. The debate about its exact purpose may never be settled, but the undeniable, profound truth of the artifact is this: someone, over 2,000 years ago, understood the basic principle of a galvanic cell. They knew that two different metals placed in a specific acidic solution would create an invisible force. This is not magic or superstition. It is applied electrochemistry, a foundational concept of the modern world, sitting quietly in a clay pot centuries before names like Volta or Galvani entered the scientific lexicon. It challenges the linear narrative of discovery we so often cling to. It suggests that practical science could exist as a craft tradition, passed down by artisans without grand theories or written formulas, until that knowledge was eventually lost. If something as fundamental as a battery could be invented, used, and then forgotten, what other simple, elegant solutions to ancient problems have vanished from history? The Baghdad Battery does not show us a lost advanced civilization with glowing cities. Instead, it reveals something perhaps more intriguing, a flicker of pragmatic genius in the ancient workshop, a spark of understanding that waited 2 millennia to be rekindled. That pragmatic spark of electricity illuminates a single workshop, but an entire continent lies hidden beneath a map. In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis created a world map on gazelle skin parchment. It was a beautiful, detailed work, blending the known geography of his time with notes on his own voyages and observations. For centuries, it was considered a historical curiosity, a snapshot of early 16th century understanding. Then, in the 1920s, scholars took a much closer look. The map accurately depicts the eastern coast of South America with a precision that was remarkable for the era. But the true mystery lies far to the south. The map shows a landmass extending from the southern tip of that continent, a landmass that bears a startling resemblance to the coastline of Antarctica. This is impossible by the standard historical record. Antarctica was not officially sighted until the year 1820, over 3 centuries after Piri Reis put ink to skin. And there is a second, deeper layer of impossibility. The coastline on the Piri Reis map does not show Antarctica as a frozen, ice-locked continent. Instead, it depicts what looks like a temperate, ice-free land with bays, rivers, and mountain ranges. According to modern geology, the last time Antarctica was free of its immense ice sheet was millions of years ago, long before any known human civilization could have existed to map it. So how did an Ottoman admiral in the 1500s draw this? Piri Reis himself provided a crucial clue in the extensive notes written on the map. He states plainly that he did not invent this southern geography. He compiled his work from a collection of about 20 older source maps, some of which he describes as dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Those source maps are lost to history. This admission transforms the artifact from a simple map into a ghostly echo. It suggests that the knowledge on the Piri Reis map was copied, and perhaps recopied over centuries, from much older documents that captured a world unrecognizable to us. The implication is staggering. It points to the possibility of a forgotten epoch of exploration, undertaken by a seafaring culture advanced enough to chart a globally accurate map of a continent that would later vanish under miles of ice. Who were these ancient cartographers? Were they part of a civilization whose maritime achievements have been completely erased from our collective memory? The map does not give us answers. Instead, it presents a silent, haunting question mark on the timeline of human discovery. It challenges the very foundation of cartographic history, suggesting that our ancestors may have known the shape of the world in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. The land it shows is not just a geographical location. It is a placeholder for an entire lost chapter of human ambition and knowledge. A map hints at forgotten continents, while a small wooden bird suggests the sky was not the limit. In the year 1898, during an excavation of a burial site near Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a curious object. It was a small, elegant artifact carved from sycamore wood, dating to approximately 200 years before the Common Era. To the untrained eye, it was simply a stylized bird figurine, perhaps a toy or a ceremonial offering, but its form gave experts pause. This Saqqara bird, as it became known, did not look like any ordinary bird. Its wings were perfectly straight, flat, and aerodynamically shaped, unlike the curved wings of a bird in flight. Its body was streamlined, and most strikingly, it featured a distinct vertical tailfin, a component no bird in nature possesses. This tailfin is not decorative. It is a stabilizing rudder, a critical feature for maintaining direction in flight, but one that is utterly unnecessary for a model of a living creature. The design is eerily familiar. To a modern observer, it looks unmistakably like a model glider or a small aircraft. The official explanation remains that it is a stylized representation of a falcon, a bird sacred to the god Horus, or perhaps a child's toy. Yet the precision of its form has fueled a century of fascination and debate. Could it be more? In the 1970s, a specialist in aerodynamics examined the artifact and constructed a scaled-up, weighted model for testing. When launched, the model did something remarkable. It demonstrated genuine aerodynamic lift and, with a small adjustment to its tail, was capable of stable, gliding flight for considerable distances. The tests confirmed that the object's shape was not merely artistic, it was functionally sound. This finding does not prove the ancient Egyptians had airplanes. But it does force a profound question about the origins of inspiration. How did a craftsman, over 2,000 years ago, arrive at a shape that so perfectly aligns with principles of flight that humanity would not formally understand for millennia? One compelling theory is one of pure, brilliant observation. Perhaps an artisan, watching the flight of birds or seeds like the sycamore seed pod which spins like a helicopter rotor, intuitively grasped the concept of lift and stability. They then abstracted that natural principle into a clean, geometric form, creating an object that was both art and an unconscious model of physics. Another, more speculative line of thought wonders if the form was copied from something else entirely, a representation of a concept or even a tool from a context now lost to us. The Saqqara Bird stands as a quiet monument to human intuition. It challenges the timeline of invention, not by showing us a complex engine, but by presenting a simple, elegant shape that works. It reminds us that the leap from observing nature to mimicking its principles is a foundational human impulse. This artifact is not necessarily evidence of ancient aviation. It is perhaps evidence of ancient wonder, a physical question carved in wood about what it means to soar. What other intuitive leaps, captured in clay or stone, have we overlooked because we assumed our ancestors could not possibly have seen that far ahead? The silent, aerodynamic form of the Saqqara Bird invites us to reconsider human intuition, but another artifact presents a challenge that is far more literal and concrete. In the summer of 1936, a couple hiking along a creek bed near London, Texas, noticed an unusual piece of rock protruding from the stone. When they cracked it open, they found something astonishing inside. Encased within the solid rock was a hammer. Its head was made of iron, and a portion of its wooden handle remained, partially transformed into coal from the immense pressure and age of its surroundings. This is the London hammer, an object that seems to defy the very logic of time. The geological formation from which it was extracted is a Cretaceous period rock layer, dated by geologists to be well over 100 million years old. According to everything we understand about natural history, that is a time when dinosaurs roamed the earth and the earliest ancestors of humans were small, shrew-like mammals. The sophisticated tool-making required to forge an iron head and fit it to a wooden handle simply should not exist in that epoch. The immediate and most common scientific explanation is that the hammer is not as old as the rock that encased it. The theory suggests that the tool, perhaps from the 19th century, was lost or discarded in a creek. Over time, dissolved minerals in the water could have precipitated around it, forming a hard, concretionary nodule that gave the appearance of it being part of the ancient bedrock. This process, while slow from a human perspective, can happen within centuries, not millions of years. It is a plausible, natural explanation. Yet, the conditions of its discovery continue to fuel debate. The hammer was found deeply embedded within the stone, and the concretion itself appeared continuous and undisturbed. For those who question the official narrative, this artifact represents something far more disruptive. If the hammer is genuinely contemporaneous with the Cretaceous rock, the implications are staggering. It would suggest the presence of an intelligent, tool-using species at a point in deep time when no such species should exist in the fossil record. It points toward the possibility of a lost industrial capability, or even a civilization that rose and fell in an era we consider purely prehistoric. This idea completely unravels the conventional timeline of human progress. The London hammer, therefore, is less about the hammer itself and more about the story of the rock that holds it. It stands as a stark, physical symbol of the anomalies that conventional science must work to reconcile. It embodies the tension between a straightforward geological explanation and a mystery that, if true, would rewrite our planet's history. It forces a simple but profound question upon us. How do we distinguish between a fascinating oddity with a logical explanation and a genuine artifact that upends everything? This humble tool, locked in stone, does not provide an answer. Instead, it holds two competing histories within its iron head and challenges us to decide which one we are willing to believe. A tool locked in stone questions our timeline, but a spark plug sealed within a rock formation seems to laugh at it. In February 1961, 3 friends were rockhounding in the Coso Mountains of California, searching for geodes. These rounded stones are natural treasures, hollow inside and lined with beautiful crystals that form over immense spans of time. When one of the men, Wallace Lane, cut open a promising geode with a diamond saw, he expected to see a cavity glittering with quartz or amethyst. Instead, he found something utterly incongruous. At the geode's center was a cylindrical metal object, mounted inside what appeared to be a ceramic or porcelain collar, with a rusted iron shaft at its core. To anyone familiar with early 20th century automobiles, the identification was immediate. It looked exactly like a spark plug. This was the Coso Artifact, an object that by all geological reasoning should not exist. Geodes form through a slow, meticulous process. Mineral-rich water seeps into a cavity in rock, and over hundreds of thousands, even millions of years, crystals grow layer by layer, eventually creating a solid, spherical stone. For a man-made object to be found inside one means it would have to be older than the formation process itself, placing it in a prehistoric era long before the invention of the internal combustion engine. The mystery ignited a firestorm of speculation. Could this be definitive proof of a lost civilization with advanced technology, or even evidence of ancient visitors from elsewhere? The idea of an out-of-place artifact, or upend, was thrilling. It suggested our geological and historical clocks were profoundly wrong. Yet, as with the London hammer, a more mundane explanation emerged upon closer scientific scrutiny. Researchers and skeptics examined the available evidence and proposed a different story. The object was almost certainly a champion spark plug from the 1920s, a common model used in early Ford Model T and Model A engines. But how did it get inside a rock? The answer lies in a natural process that can mimic geology on a human timescale. If a spark plug was lost in a dry lake bed or a mineral-rich environment, it could have become the nucleus for a concretion. Hard, cement-like minerals like iron oxide and calcium carbonate can precipitate from water and bind to an object, layer upon layer, eventually forming a hard, nodular mass that looks very much like a geode from the outside. This could happen in a matter of decades, not millennia. The Coso Artifact, therefore, sits at a fascinating crossroads. For some, it remains a potent symbol of everything that might be wrong with our established history, a literal engine of doubt encased in stone. For others, it is a perfect case study in how natural processes can create astonishing illusions, teaching us to be careful interpreters of what we find. This duality is its true power. The artifact challenges us less about the past and more about our own minds. It forces a critical choice. Do we see a mystery that overturns textbooks, or do we see a lesson in patience and scientific deduction? It pushes us to scrutinize that ever-shifting boundary between a miraculous discovery and a simple misunderstanding. In doing so, it asks a question far more important than whether ancient people had spark plugs. It asks how we decide what is real. The choice between miracle and misunderstanding is a constant tension in our study of the past, and nowhere is that tension more vividly illustrated than in a tale that begins in a remote mountain cave. In 1938, according to a story that has since become legendary, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pute was exploring a series of high-altitude caves in the Bayan Ha Mountains near the border of Tibet. Deep within one cavern, he and his team made a startling discovery. They did not find bones or pottery, but hundreds of strange stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter and 3/4 of an inch thick. Each disc had a perfectly round hole in its center, and emanating from that hole was a fine, continuous spiral groove that wound its way to the outer edge. They looked for all the world like ancient stone records. The story claims the discs were initially catalogued and stored away, their true nature unrecognized. Then, decades later in the 1960s, a researcher examining the stones made an even more extraordinary claim. Under a microscope, he reported that the tiny spiral grooves were not grooves at all, but a continuous line of minuscule, etched hieroglyphic characters. When these characters were allegedly translated, they told an astonishing narrative. The inscriptions described a group of beings called the Dropa, who long ago crashed their spacecraft into the remote, inhospitable mountains. Stranded and unable to repair their vessel, the survivors tried to communicate with the local human tribes, eventually integrating with them over generations. The stones, the translation claimed, were their recorded history. This account, if true, would be the most direct archaeological evidence for ancient extraterrestrial contact ever found. It is a story that has fueled countless books, documentaries, and theories, becoming a cornerstone of what is often called the ancient astronaut hypothesis. It presents a vision of prehistory where the sky was not empty, and where human development may have been influenced by visitors from the stars. The narrative is powerful, evocative, and challenges the very foundation of how we view our lonely place in the cosmos. Yet, here is where the story encounters the rigorous scrutiny of mainstream archaeology. No major academic institution recognizes the Dropa Stones as genuine artifacts from a 12,000-year-old crash. No photographs of the hieroglyphs or the full translated text have ever been published in a peer-reviewed journal. The original discoverer, Kai Pute, is a figure who cannot be independently verified in archaeological records. Most scholars who have investigated the case conclude the stones are likely much later ceremonial objects, perhaps Neolithic by discs used in burial rituals, or that the entire episode is an elaborate 20th century fabrication that grew in the telling. So why does the legend endure with such tenacity? The power of the Dropa Stones lies not in their physical reality, which is deeply questionable, but in what they represent about a profound human desire. They are a perfect artifact of our imagination. They give a tangible, physical form to one of humanity's oldest and most persistent questions: are we alone? In the absence of proof, the story provides a concrete answer, a set of objects you could theoretically hold in your hand that says we were not alone and that our ancestors knew it. This intertwining of myth and potential artifact is the true challenge the Dropa Stones present. They force us to examine the boundary between evidence and belief, between what we can prove about the past and what we deeply wish were true. They highlight how easily a compelling narrative can attach itself to a physical object, transforming it into a symbol of a much larger idea. In the end, the stones may tell us less about ancient astronauts and more about ourselves, about our endless capacity for wonder and our timeless search for connection in a vast and silent universe. What does it mean when the artifact we most want to find is the one that remains forever just out of reach? The Dropa Stones are a story we want to believe, but the Nazca Lines are a reality we cannot ignore. Spread across nearly 200 square miles of the bone-dry Pampa Colorada in southern Peru, these are not artifacts you can hold. They are the desert itself, transformed into art on a scale that defies human comprehension. From ground level, the landscape appears as a confusing network of shallow, scraped pathways, no more than a foot deep, but ascend to the vantage point of a hill or, more appropriately, the sky, and the chaos resolves into breathtaking order. The desert floor becomes a canvas for colossal figures, a hummingbird with wings outstretched over 300 feet, a spider nearly 150 feet long, a monkey with a spiraling tail, and a condor with a wingspan that would dwarf a modern jetliner. These are the Nazca Lines, created by removing the dark, sun-baked surface stones to reveal the lighter-colored earth beneath, a contrast that has preserved their forms for over 2,000 years. The people who made them, the Nazca culture, flourished in this harsh region from around 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after. They were master weavers and potters, but their most enduring legacy is this gallery etched into the earth itself. The central mystery is as vast as the drawings. Why would a people create such immense, intricate artworks that they themselves could never see in their entirety? The technology of flight, in any form we recognize, was millennia away. This paradox has spawned a spectrum of theories, each trying to solve the puzzle of purpose. Some scholars see an astronomical calendar, with the lines pointing to celestial events like solstice sunrises or important star clusters, guiding agricultural and ritual cycles. Others propose they were sacred pathways, walked during religious ceremonies to connect with deities or ancestral spirits, the very act of traversing the lines being the point. The sheer variety of forms, from precise geometric shapes miles long to recognizable living creatures, suggests a complex cosmology, a map of beliefs written in the language of the land. The technical achievement is equally staggering. How did they achieve such precision over such vast distances? The answer lies in a combination of simple tools and profound skill. Researchers believe the Nazca used basic surveying techniques. They could have scaled up small models by using a central hub and ropes to mark out radial lines, creating perfect circles and triangles. Straight lines, some running arrow straight for miles, could have been made using a series of aligned stakes. The endurance of the lines is a testament to the unique environment, a plateau where wind is minimal and rain almost non-existent, allowing their work to remain frozen in time. This was not the work of outside visitors with advanced technology, but of a sophisticated culture deeply attuned to their environment, capable of organizing community labor and executing a visionary plan across generations. Ultimately, the Nazca Lines challenge our modern assumptions about art, communication, and perspective. We live in a world where we can instantly see our creations from any angle, from a satellite view of a city to a selfie. The Nazca conceived of their art for a viewer that was not human, or at least not earthbound. They created for the gods, for the sky itself. This shift in perspective is perhaps their greatest gift to us. They force us to consider a world view where the most important audience was not in the here and now, but in the heavens above. The lines are not a message we were meant to receive, but one we have accidentally intercepted, a silent, monumental prayer written in the dust, waiting for the sky to read it. What does it say about a culture that invested so much in a message for an audience they could never see? It speaks of a faith and a vision that operated on a scale we are still struggling to fully measure. While the Nazca etched their prayers for the sky to see, another culture sculpted the earth itself into forms of profound, silent perfection. Deep in the lush river deltas of Costa Rica, buried by centuries of jungle soil, workers clearing land for a banana plantation in the 1930s uncovered an astonishing sight. Protruding from the earth were dozens of massive stone spheres, some as small as a baseball, others towering as high as 8 feet and weighing over 16 tons. These are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, or Los Bolas, created by the Diquis culture beginning around 600 years after the Common Era. Their smooth, almost impossibly round surfaces gleam in the tropical sun, geometric mysteries scattered across a landscape of tangled green. The immediate question is as heavy as the stones themselves. How, and more importantly why, would a society without metal tools, without the wheel, invest such staggering effort into making near-perfect spheres from solid granite? The process itself was a monumental feat of patience and skill, using only stone hammers and possibly heat from fires to fracture the bedrock. Artisans would first rough out a massive block. Then, through a painstaking process of pecking and grinding with abrasives like sand, they would slowly, over what must have been generations for the largest examples, wear the stone down into a sphere. The precision is what truly astounds. Many of the spheres have been measured and found to be within millimeters of perfect roundness, a level of accuracy that rivals modern machining. Achieving this with only human hands, simple tools, and an eye for symmetry represents a profound understanding of geometry and form that we rarely attribute to pre-Columbian societies. Their purpose remains an open, tantalizing mystery. Some were found arranged in alignments, leading to theories they were astronomical markers, pointing to solstices or important stars, a terrestrial map of the heavens. Others were discovered near the residences of high-status individuals, suggesting they were symbols of power, wealth, and authority, literally solid embodiments of a chief's influence. Another idea posits they marked territorial boundaries or sacred pathways, their imposing presence defining spaces of political or spiritual significance. Perhaps the truth encompasses all these ideas. What is undeniable is the societal effort they represent. Moving a 16-ton sphere from a quarry, sometimes miles away, through swampy, uneven terrain required coordinated labor, sophisticated engineering knowledge of leverage and rollers, and a powerful communal will. This was not the work of a simple village. It speaks to a complex, organized civilization with specialized artisans, leaders who could command large workforces, and a shared cultural vision compelling enough to justify decades of backbreaking labor. The spheres are not just artifacts, they are crystallized ambition. Then, as mysteriously as they appeared, the Dikwi's culture faded around 1500, and the jungle began to reclaim its own. The spheres were toppled, buried, and forgotten. Today, they stand as silent sentinels, their original configurations lost, their language of arrangement a code we can no longer crack. They challenge our tendency to underestimate ancient societies, proving that technological sophistication is not always about gears or engines. Sometimes it is about the relentless pursuit of an ideal shape, the will to impose perfect geometry upon the imperfect chaos of the natural world. In their flawless curves, we see not just stone, but a testament to human patience, cooperation, and a desire to create something that would, quite literally, stand the test of time. What does such a legacy feel like, to leave behind not words or weapons, but perfect forms of stone, waiting centuries in the dark for someone to wonder at the hands that made them? Perfect geometry in the jungle gives way to a gallery of impossible scenes etched in stone. In the 1960s, a Peruvian physician named Javier Cabrera Darquia began acquiring a collection of unusual stones from local farmers. These were not the smooth spheres of Costa Rica, but thousands of andesite rocks, a hard, gray volcanic stone, each one intricately engraved with a vast array of images. The scenes depicted on these Ica Stones, as they became known, are nothing short of astonishing. They show human figures engaged in activities that shatter our conventional historical timeline. In one engraving, a man rides on the back of a triceratops, a creature we believe went extinct 66 million years before the first humans walked the earth. In another, a surgeon performs what appears to be a complex operation, possibly a heart transplant or cesarean section, using precise tools. Other stones depict telescopes viewing celestial bodies, detailed world maps showing lost continents, and advanced machinery. The farmers claimed they had discovered the stones in a vast, secret cave, a claim that only added to the aura of mystery. If these artifacts were authentic, their implications would be seismic. They would suggest the existence of an ancient civilization that not only coexisted with dinosaurs but possessed a sophisticated understanding of medicine, astronomy, and technology rivaling our own. The entire fossil record and the story of human evolution would require a complete rewrite. It is a narrative of radical, forgotten history. The allure of this idea is powerful, offering a vision of a past far more complex and interconnected than our textbooks allow. It speaks to a deep-seated curiosity about lost knowledge and hidden chapters of the human story. However, the scientific and archaeological community has reached a near-unanimous verdict on the Ica Stones. They are considered modern forgeries. Investigations revealed that the farmers who supplied the stones later admitted to carving them themselves, using simple tools and copying images from comic books, textbooks, and popular magazines of the time. The stones showed no signs of the natural weathering or mineral deposits one would expect from objects buried for centuries. The physician who championed them, Dr. Cabrera, was a true believer, but his collection is seen as a product of 20th century creativity, not ancient testimony. So why do the stones continue to captivate? Their true significance lies not as evidence of a lost world, but as a profound case study in the human relationship with the past. The Ica Stones represent how easily a physical object can become a canvas for our most ambitious historical fantasies. They highlight the intense debate between those who seek to upend established narratives and the academic institutions that rely on rigorous methods of authentication, like stratigraphy, carbon dating, and peer review. This tension is not just about these specific rocks, it is about who gets to tell the story of humanity. Do we trust the slow, painstaking accumulation of evidence, or do we embrace the thrilling possibility that everything we know is wrong? The stones serve as a cautionary tale about the importance of provenance and skepticism, reminding us that the desire to believe can sometimes outpace the evidence required for belief. Yet they also underscore a timeless truth. The most compelling artifacts are often those that ask the biggest questions, even if the answers ultimately lead us back to our own imaginations. What does it mean when an artifact tells us more about the era in which it was discovered than the era it claims to represent? The Ica Stones, in their undeniable modernity, challenge us to examine not ancient history, but our own endless fascination with rewriting it. A single silver coin can rewrite a continent's story. In the year 1957, an amateur archaeologist named Guy Melgren was excavating a Native American shell midden at the Nazca Point site in Brooklyn, Maine. Sifting through layers of oyster shells and hearth debris left by the Penobscot people centuries ago, his trowel struck something small, hard, and out of place. It was a worn, blackened coin. After careful cleaning, experts at the Smithsonian Institution identified it. This was no colonial American penny. It was a Norse silver penny, a currency known as a penning, minted between 1065 and 1080 of the Common Era. On one side, it bore the name of a king, Olaf Kyrre, who ruled Norway in the late 11th century. This tiny artifact, smaller than a modern dime, had traveled across an ocean and through nearly 1,000 years to rest in the soil of coastal Maine. Its discovery sent a quiet shockwave through the world of archaeology. For generations, the Norse sagas, epic stories passed down orally and later written in Iceland, spoke of daring voyages westward across the North Atlantic. They told of explorers like Leif Erikson, who around the year 1000 established a settlement he called Vinland, a place of wild grapes and timber, generally believed to be somewhere on the northeastern coast of North America. The archaeological confirmation of these sagas came in the 1960s at Elance Oaks Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, where the remains of Norse buildings were unearthed. But that site was over 1,000 miles north of Maine. The Maine Penny, found amidst the remains of a Native American settlement dated to between 1200 and 1350, presents a different, more intimate puzzle. How did an 11th century Norwegian coin end up in a 13th century Wabanaki site so far to the south? The simplest explanation is also the most revolutionary. It could be direct, physical evidence of face-to-face contact between Norse explorers or traders and the indigenous peoples of the northeastern woodlands, an object exchanged, lost, or deliberately deposited centuries before Columbus sailed. This single coin would then be a tangible echo of those brief, likely cautious encounters described in the sagas, meetings that may have involved trade, conflict, or cultural exchange. Yet the scientific mind requires caution. Skeptics offer an alternative pathway. The coin could have arrived much later through extensive indigenous trade networks that span the continent. A Norse object left in Newfoundland or Labrador could have been picked up and traded southward from community to community over generations, eventually reaching Maine long after the last Viking ship had departed. It might have been valued not as currency, but as a curious piece of raw material, a shiny bit of exotic silver to be worked into a bead or ornament. This possibility cannot be entirely dismissed, but the context of its discovery gives weight to the more direct connection. It was not found in isolation. It was recovered from a confirmed archaeological layer at a coastal settlement, a place perfectly positioned for contact with seafaring visitors. It was found alongside thousands of other Native American artifacts, suggesting it was genuinely part of that community's material world, not a later accidental drop. Whether handed directly from a Norse traveler to a Wabanaki hunter or passed through 100 hands over 2 centuries, the Maine Penny irrevocably changes the narrative. It challenges the traditional Eurocentric story of discovery that begins with Columbus in 1492. That story paints the Atlantic as an impenetrable barrier until one specific moment. This coin and the settlement at Elance Ox Meadows reveal that barrier was sporadically, bravely crossed centuries earlier. History becomes not a switch that flips on, but a slow dawn with occasional early rays of light. The penny underscores a profound truth about the human past. Connections were often tenuous, fleeting, and left few traces. A whole saga of exploration and encounter can be distilled into one small silver disc lost in a pile of oyster shells. It reminds us that our maps of the past are not just defined by great empires and permanent colonies, but also by the ephemeral moments of contact, the traded glance, the exchanged object, the story told around a fire about strangers from across the sea. This artifact does not prove a Norse settlement in Maine. Instead, it proves possibility. It proves that the world was more connected and human curiosity more boundless than our simplest histories dare to suggest. What other fleeting meetings, now invisible to us, once changed the course of a local world? Deep within the sacred darkness of an Egyptian temple, a stone wall holds a scene that seems to flicker with anachronistic light. In the crypt of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a detailed relief carved over 2,000 years ago shows a strange and captivating object. It resembles a large, elongated pear or perhaps a glass bulb. Inside this bulb curls a snake in a straight line, its head pointing toward one end. This serpentine form is held aloft by a pillar, and from the base of the object, a cable runs to a box that is gripped by a kneeling figure, while another figure stands beside it, as if in observation or operation. To a modern eye, the interpretation feels startlingly obvious. It looks like a giant light bulb with the snake as the glowing filament, connected by an insulated cable to a power source or battery held in the box. This is the Dendera Light, an image that has become a cornerstone for theories suggesting the ancient Egyptians possessed and used electric lighting. Proponents of this view ask a compelling question. How else could the builders of the pyramids and elaborate, windowless tombs have illuminated their work? The deep, pitch-black interiors of these structures, far from any natural light source, would have required an immense amount of torches or oil lamps, yet no soot stains have been found on many of the ceilings. Could this relief be a technical diagram, a literal representation of the advanced technology that solved this very problem? The idea is electrifying, proposing a strand of practical knowledge that was lost to time, perhaps preserved only in the symbolic language of the priesthood. Mainstream Egyptology, however, reads this same stone with a completely different lexicon. Scholars point to the rich symbolic world of Egyptian religion. In this interpretation, the bulb is not a glass enclosure but the womb of the sky goddess, or a stylized lotus flower, a symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake is not a filament but the god Harsomptus, a serpent deity representing the life force and primordial energy being born from the lotus. The pillar is a jed pillar, symbolizing stability, and the box is a divine shrine. The entire scene is a complex cosmological diagram, depicting the moment of creation itself, where the serpent of chaos is summoned into the ordered world. This is not an instruction manual for electricians, but a theological statement carved in stone. So who is right? This is where the artifact presents its true, profound challenge. It forces us to confront the lens through which we view the ancient world. Are we projecting our own technological framework onto a culture that thought in deeply symbolic and mythic terms? Or are we too quick to dismiss the literal ingenuity of our ancestors, compartmentalizing their achievements into safe categories of ritual and superstition? The debate over the Dendera Light is ultimately a debate about ancient perspective. For the Egyptians, the line between the symbolic and the literal was often blurred. A symbol held power because it participated in the reality it represented. The life force of a serpent and the illuminating power of light could be conceptually intertwined in a way that our modern, materialist minds struggle to grasp. The relief may not depict a light bulb as we understand it, but it very clearly depicts light, creation, and controlled energy as divine principles, perhaps in their understanding, representing the concept of sacred illumination in this specific, bulb-like form was the most accurate way to convey its nature. The Dendera Light does not give us a clear answer about ancient electricity. Instead, it illuminates the vast gap between ancient and modern thought. It challenges us to be humble interpreters, to learn the language of symbols before jumping to technological conclusions. Yet, it also leaves a tantalizing space for wonder. In a civilization capable of aligning monuments with celestial precision and moving mountains of stone, what other forms of applied knowledge, now invisible to us, might have been expressed in the only vocabulary they had, the vocabulary of myth and symbol? The wall at Dendera holds not a schematic but a mirror, reflecting back our own desires to see the past either as mystically alien or improbably familiar. The symbolic light of Dendera fades, replaced by the cold, hard reality of an object that simply should not exist. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench along the banks of the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania, uncovered something bizarre. Buried under 35 feet of compacted sand and clay, alongside the massive, fossilized bones of a mastodon, was a strange, wedge-shaped object. It was heavy, metallic, and covered in a thick layer of aluminum oxide. When cleaned and analyzed, the composition was even more baffling. The object was made from a complex alloy consisting primarily of aluminum, but also containing copper, zinc, lead, and other trace elements. This was not a natural nugget of metal. It was a manufactured piece shaped by human or mechanical hands. The problem is one of time. While aluminum is the most common metal in the Earth's crust, it is never found in a pure metallic state in nature. It bonds fiercely with other elements. The industrial process to extract and refine pure aluminum, requiring immense electrical current, was not invented until the 1820s. This technological milestone is a cornerstone of modern history. Yet, the geological layer where the Aiud artifact was found, nestled with mastodon remains, dates to the end of the last ice age, around 11,000 years before the Common Era. In that distant epoch, human societies were nomadic hunter-gatherers, working with stone, bone, and perhaps simple copper. The idea of them producing a sophisticated aluminum alloy is, according to everything we know, an absolute impossibility. The artifact presents a classic, frustrating puzzle. On one side, you have the thrilling, disruptive possibility. Could this be physical evidence of a lost industrial process, a forgotten metallurgical tradition from a prehistoric culture advanced enough to alloy metals we associate with the machine age? It is a narrative that completely unravels the linear story of human progress, suggesting peaks of technology that were reached and then catastrophically lost in deep time. The artifact's form, like a heavy tool or part, only fuels this speculation. What was it part of? A machine, a vehicle, a piece of advanced construction equipment? The questions it prompts are dizzying. The opposing side, guided by the scientific principle of Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one, offers a more grounded answer. The most plausible scenario is that the artifact is not ancient at all. It is a piece of 20th century machinery, likely a tooth from a modern excavator or dredging bucket, made of durable aluminum alloy. This piece could have been lost or discarded during earlier, unrecorded work near the riverbank. Over time, natural processes like flooding and sedimentation could have buried it deep within the layers, its position among the mastodon bones being a coincidence of geology, not contemporaneity. In this view, the artifact is an intrusion, a red herring that accidentally found its way into an ancient context, creating an illusion of impossibility. This tension is the artifact's true essence. It is a perfect case study in how we interpret anomalies. Do we allow the exciting anomaly to rewrite history, or do we diligently search for the mundane explanation that preserves the established timeline? The Aiud artifact forces archaeologists and historians to be detectives of context. It pushes them to question the integrity of the site itself, to examine every possibility of disturbance or error in the original reporting. It highlights how a single object without a perfectly documented chain of custody from the moment of discovery can become a focal point for endless debate. Ultimately, this wedge of metal challenges our confidence in the ground beneath our feet, literally and figuratively. It asks us how sure we can really be about what belongs where in the deep layers of time. Is the past a neatly organized library, or is it a much messier attic where objects from different eras can sometimes get shuffled into the wrong boxes? The Aiud artifact does not provide a definitive answer about ancient aluminum smelters. Instead, it stands as a metallic question mark, a reminder that some of the most profound mysteries are not carved in temple walls, but found in the river mud, waiting to be misread or miraculously understood. A metallic question mark buried in river mud speaks of deep time, but a stone carved with words offers a story we can almost read. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing tree stumps from his field near Kensington, Minnesota. As he and his son pried up the roots of a young aspen tree, they noticed a large, flat slab of grey-wacky stone tangled in the roots. Turning it over, Oman saw lines of strange, angular characters cut into its face. He had found what would become known as the Kensington Runestone. The inscription, carved in runic letters of a style used in medieval Scandinavia, tells a harrowing tale of exploration and hardship. Translated, it reads as a message from a party of 30 Norse and Goth explorers, dated to the year 1362. It states that the group had journeyed inland from their ships, which were waiting for them 14 days' travel to the west. The inscription ends with a grim note stating that 10 of their men were killed, likely in a conflict, and asks that the stone be found and their story known. If this stone is authentic, its implications are profound. It would not only confirm that Norse explorers reached the middle of North America, hundreds of miles from any known coastal landing, but it would also push the date of their presence forward by over 350 years from the Vinland settlements. This would mean Norse expeditions were occurring at the same time medieval kingdoms were consolidating in Europe, suggesting a sustained, if sporadic, interest in the Western lands long after Leif Erikson's era. The stone would rewrite the map of pre-Columbian contact, placing Scandinavian travelers deep in the heart of the continent a full century before Columbus was even born. Yet from the moment of its discovery, the stone has been shrouded in intense controversy. The majority of academic linguists and historians classify it as a clever 19th century hoax. They point to linguistic anomalies in the runic text, arguing it mixes rune forms from different periods and regions in ways no genuine medieval carver would. The language itself, they say, contains modern Scandinavian grammatical constructions. The story of its discovery, conveniently found by a Scandinavian immigrant in an area heavily settled by other Scandinavians, raises suspicions of a patriotic fabrication, a creation meant to give the new immigrants a deep, noble history in their adopted land. For those who defend its authenticity, the evidence is equally compelling. They cite geological studies showing the weathering in the carved grooves is consistent with centuries of exposure, not a few years buried in a field. They argue the runic forms can be traced to specific, obscure dialects, knowledge unlikely for a 19th century farmer to possess. The very ordinariness of Olof Oman, a man with no history of scholarly deception, is sometimes presented in his favor. Why would he go to such elaborate lengths for a prank that brought him mostly ridicule and academic scorn? The Kensington Runestone, therefore, is far more than a rock with scratches on it. It has become a perfect symbol of the battleground that history can become. On one side stands the fortress of academic consensus, built on peer review, linguistic analysis, and a cautious approach to extraordinary claims. On the other side stands the power of a tangible object and a compelling story that resonates with popular imagination and regional identity. This artifact challenges us to ask a difficult question about how history is certified. When does evidence overcome skepticism? Is a lack of perfect provenance enough to dismiss a find that feels historically plausible? The stone illustrates the immense difficulty of proving a solitary object's truth when it stands outside the expected narrative. It exists in a limbo too controversial to be embraced by museums as a central relic, yet too persistent to be completely forgotten. Its legacy is not a settled fact but an enduring debate. It reminds us that history is not just discovered, it is argued over, defended, and sometimes desperately wished into being. In the end, the Kensington Runestone may tell us less about 14th century explorers and more about the 19th century community that found it, and our own timeless desire to find our stories written in stone. What does it mean when an artifact's greatest power is not to provide an answer, but to keep a question passionately alive for generations? A story carved in runes is debated by scholars, but an image woven into cloth is debated by the world. In the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, rests a piece of linen approximately 14 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. On its surface is the faint, haunting, sepia-toned image of a man, front and back, as if the cloth had been laid over and under a body. The figure shows the wounds of crucifixion, a pierced side, and marks consistent with a crown of thorns. This is the Shroud of Turin, revered by many for centuries as the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. It is not merely an artifact, it is a profound intersection where faith, science, and history meet in a silent, unresolved confrontation. The central question is deceptively simple. What created this image? The cloth itself has a documented history traceable to the 1300s, when a French knight presented it. For hundreds of years, it was an object of pilgrimage and veneration, its origins shrouded in the mystery of time. Then, in the late 20th century, science attempted to provide a definitive answer. In 1988, with permission from the Vatican, small samples from a corner of the shroud were sent to 3 independent laboratories for radiocarbon dating. The results were unanimous. The linen fibers dated to between 1260 and 1390 of the Common Era, squarely within the medieval period. To many, this was conclusive proof. The shroud was an elaborate creation from the time of its first documented appearance, likely a forgery meant to inspire the faithful. Case closed, yet the story refused to end there. Almost immediately, questions arose about the testing itself. Critics and some researchers noted the sample taken came from a corner of the shroud that had been handled, mended, and possibly contaminated over centuries by smoke, water, and the oils from countless hands. Could this contamination have skewed the carbon dating, making a much older piece of linen appear medieval? The debate over the sample's purity continues to this day, a technical argument that leaves the door to an older origin slightly ajar. But the greater, more captivating mystery is the image itself. How was it made? The faint, straw-yellow discoloration on the linen fibers is not painted. There is no pigment, no brushstrokes, no outline. The image possesses a unique, three-dimensional quality, as if the intensity of the coloration corresponds precisely to the distance between the cloth and a body. Modern forensic analysis has even suggested the blood stains show a serum halo, a detail a forger in the 1300s would have had no way of knowing. No one has been able to perfectly replicate the shroud's image using only the materials and knowledge available in the medieval world. This inexplicable nature fuels the enduring fascination. Is it the work of a forgotten artistic genius who devised a lost technique, a form of early photography using light and chemicals? Or does the image stem from a singular, catastrophic event, a burst of energy at the moment of resurrection that left a photographic imprint on the surrounding cloth? The shroud does not yield answers, it only deepens the questions. Ultimately, the Shroud of Turin challenges more than our historical timeline. It challenges our categories of understanding. It forces a confrontation between empirical evidence and spiritual belief, between what can be dated in a lab and what can be felt in the human heart. It asks us to consider whether an object can be both a medieval artifact and a sacred relic simultaneously, its true meaning residing not in its material age, but in the centuries of devotion it has inspired. The shroud remains quietly holding its secret. It is a mirror reflecting not a face, but our own deep need to find tangible connection to the profound mysteries at the very core of human experience. What does it mean when an object's greatest power is its ability to sustain a question across centuries, uniting and dividing us in our search for truth? A single piece of pottery can hold 2 worlds within its curve. Along the shores of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, at a site known as Chihuahua, a farmer unearthed a large, ceremonial stone bowl decades ago. This is the Fuente Magna bowl, a vessel of polished stone that would likely have been a fascinating local artifact were it not for the markings covering its interior. Etched into the surface are rows of intricate symbols, a script that does not belong to the Andes. To the astonishment of researchers who later examined it, the symbols bear a striking, unsettling resemblance to ancient Sumerian cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing system of Mesopotamia, thousands of miles and an entire ocean away. Mixed with these are other glyphs that some identify as Proto-Sumerian, an even earlier form of the script. The bowl itself is stylistically similar to other ceremonial vessels from the local pre-Columbian cultures, but the writing is utterly alien to the region. If these inscriptions are genuine and ancient, the implications are staggering. It would suggest that somehow, around 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, a person or people literate in Mesopotamian writing traveled across the Atlantic or Pacific, reached the high Andes, and left behind this inscribed object. This is not a theory of lost colonies or mass migration, but of a single, profound point of contact, a message in a bottle made of stone. It proposes a thread of connection between the cradle of civilization in the Middle East and one of the great fountainheads of culture in the Americas, a thread that mainstream archaeology insists could not have existed. The bowl directly challenges what scholars call hyper-diffusionism, the idea that all major cultural advances radiated from a single source. Instead, it hints at a more interconnected ancient world, where ideas, like seeds, could be carried by unpredictable currents across vast distances. The controversy around the bowl is intense and revealing. Many linguists and archaeologists dismiss the inscriptions as either modern forgeries or, more charitably, as natural weathering marks or local designs that coincidentally resemble cuneiform. They argue that the probability of such a voyage and the complete absence of any other corroborating evidence in the archaeological record of either continent makes its authenticity virtually impossible. The burden of proof, they rightly state, rests on those making the extraordinary claim. Yet, for those who study the bowl, the structural similarities in the symbols are difficult to entirely dismiss as random scratches. The debate itself highlights a deeper tension in how we view the past. Are we to interpret the ancient world as a collection of isolated, independently innovating societies, or as a web of sporadic but real long-distance connections, however tenuous? The Fuente Magna bowl does not offer easy answers. It sits at the crossroads of two possibilities. It could be a magnificent hoax, a piece of 20th century artistry designed to create a mystery. Or it could be a genuine relic of a journey so daring, so unlikely, that it defies our standard maps of history. In either case, its power lies in the question it forces upon us. Could human curiosity and the drive to explore have bridged the world's greatest oceans millennia before we thought possible? This humble bowl, resting near the sky-high waters of Lake Titicaca, holds within its inscribed curves not just symbols, but the silent, enduring echo of a possibility we are still afraid to believe. Sometimes the most puzzling artifact is one that seems almost ordinary. In 1885, at the Wolfsegg coal mine in Austria, a miner splitting a large block of tertiary period coal made a strange discovery. Embedded within the ancient, compressed plant matter was a heavy, metallic object, roughly cube-shaped, though its edges were softened and rounded by corrosion. This is the Wolfsegg Iron, sometimes called the Salzburg Cube. At first glance, it was an unremarkable lump of metal, but its context made it extraordinary. The coal seam it came from was geologically dated to a period spanning millions of years ago, a time when modern humans did not exist, and the concept of forging metal was an impossibility countless ages in the future. The object was analyzed and found to be a specific type of forged iron, a product of deliberate human industry, not a random metallic meteorite. The immediate implication was as thrilling as it was unsettling. Could this be physical proof of an industrial civilization that rose and fell in deep time, long before our own species walked the earth? The idea captured the imagination, presenting a vision of history not as a linear climb, but as a cycle where technological achievement could be gained, lost, and entirely forgotten. This little cube became a perfect example of what enthusiasts call an out-of-place artifact, an object that seems to defy the established timeline. It appeared to be a cog, quite literally, from a machine that should not have existed. Yet, as with so many of these mysteries, a more careful examination of the site's history offered a logical pathway. The Wolfsegg mine was not a pristine, untouched geological site. It was an active 19th century industrial operation. The most plausible explanation is that the cube is not ancient at all, but a piece of mining debris from that very era, perhaps a broken tool fragment or a chunk of forged iron used in the mining machinery itself. Through a shaft, a collapse, or simple accident, this modern object could have fallen into an older layer of the mine, becoming embedded in coal that then reformed around it. Over a relatively short period, natural processes could make it appear as if it had been there for eons, creating a perfect geological illusion. This does not make the artifact unimportant. On the contrary, the Wolfsegg Iron serves a crucial role in the study of history. It stands as a masterclass in context. It challenges not our past but our methods. It reminds archaeologists and geologists that the ground is not always a perfect, undisturbed record. Human activity, especially industrial activity, can shuffle the layers of time, placing contemporary objects into ancient contexts where they become profound puzzles. The cube forces a discipline of rigorous skepticism. Before we rewrite the history of life on Earth, we must first rule out the possibility of a dropped tool from last century. In this way, the artifact is a guardian at the gate of wild speculation. It teaches us that the true mystery is often not the object itself, but the story of how it came to rest where it did. The Wolfsegg Iron does not prove the existence of a lost civilization. Instead, it proves how easily our desire to find such civilizations can be sparked by the simple, explainable mingling of different ages. It is a humble piece of forged metal that asks us a vital question, one that applies to every extraordinary find. Are we looking at a message from a forgotten world, or are we seeing our own reflection in the tangled strata of time? The boundaries between nature and artifact can blur into a single, perfect form. From the depths of South African mines, miners have extracted over 200 small, metallic spheres from rock layers known as the Precambrian pyrophyllite deposits. These are the grooved spheres or the Klerksdorp spheres. Their age is almost incomprehensible, locked within strata dated to over 2.8 billion years old. To put that in perspective, this was a time when Earth's atmosphere was toxic to life as we know it, and the most complex organisms on the planet were simple, single-celled microbes. The spheres themselves are small, ranging from the size of a pea to several centimeters across. They are made of a hard, metallic alloy, primarily iron and nickel. But it is their shape that stops the breath. Each sphere is perfectly round, and etched around its equator are 3 parallel grooves, as precise and deliberate as if machined by a lathe. They look for all the world like tiny, manufactured ball bearings from a machine built before multicellular life even existed. The immediate, thrilling question is obvious. Could these be artifacts from an impossibly ancient, non-human industrial civilization? Could they be components from a technology that predates all known life on Earth, evidence of a cycle of rise and fall on a planetary scale we can scarcely imagine? It is a narrative that speaks to our deepest fascination with lost worlds and forgotten epochs. The scientific explanation, however, guides us down a different, equally fascinating path. Geologists point to a common and wondrous natural process known as concretion. In certain mineral-rich environments, particularly where volcanic activity was present, minerals can precipitate from solution and slowly accumulate in layers around a tiny nucleus, like a grain of sand or a speck of ash. Over immense spans of time, these layers build up, often forming spherical shapes due to the uniform way the minerals crystallize. The grooves, they argue, could be the result of later geological pressures squeezing the spheres, causing the layered material to fold or separate along those lines, or perhaps marks from the surrounding rock as the sphere rotated under pressure. These natural concretions are found worldwide, though rarely with such striking symmetry, so we are presented with a classic, profound choice in interpretation. Do we see in these grooved spheres a signature of intelligence from the dawn of time, or do we see the breathtaking artistry of geology, a testament to how natural processes can mimic design with uncanny precision? This is the true challenge of the grooved spheres. They force us to refine our definitions. What exactly makes something look manufactured? Is it symmetry? Is it regularity? Nature is full of both, from the hexagonal cells of a honeycomb to the perfect spiral of a nautilus shell. The spheres sit right on that razor's edge. They push us to ask not just what we are looking at, but how we decide what it means. Their immense age adds a layer of almost philosophical weight. If they are natural, they are a stunning example of Earth's patient, creative chemistry operating over billions of years. If they are artificial, they rewrite the entire story of our planet. Yet, perhaps the most important lesson they offer is one of humility. They remind us that the ancient Earth holds wonders that can confound our categories, objects that refuse to be easily labeled as either purely natural or clearly artificial. In their silent, metallic perfection, they hold a question that is billions of years old, a question about the line between a world that makes itself and a world that is made. A terracotta head can wear the features of a world away. In the early 1930s, archaeologist Jose Garcia Payon was excavating a burial at the site of Tlaxcala in the Toluca Valley of Mexico. The burial was securely dated to a period before the Spanish arrival, specifically to sometime between the 12th and 15th centuries. Among the local artifacts, he uncovered a small, fired clay sculpture of a head. It was unassuming in size, but its appearance was anything but ordinary. The figure wore a distinct peaked cap known as a pileus, a style common in classical Greco-Roman art. The facial features, a full beard and the style of the hair were unmistakably reminiscent of Roman portraiture, a world apart from the clean-shaven, stylized human figures typical of Mesoamerican art. This was the Tlaxcala head, an artifact that seemed to have stepped out of the Mediterranean and into a Mexican grave centuries before Columbus. The immediate implication is as clear as it is controversial. If this head is authentic to its burial context, it suggests a tangible, physical connection between the Roman world and the pre-Columbian Americas. The timeline makes this possibility startling. The Roman Empire reached its greatest extent in the 2nd century of the Common Era and endured in the East for over 1,000 years. Could a Roman vessel, blown off course or driven by a spirit of exploration, have somehow crossed the Atlantic? Could a sailor or artisan from that distant culture have reached the shores of the Americas, their likeness or their very artifact eventually making its way inland through trade or tribute to be buried with honor? It is a narrative that paints the ancient oceans not as absolute barriers, but as challenging highways that might have been traversed by the boldest few. Naturally, such a claim invites intense scrutiny. Skeptics offer several logical counterpoints. The first is the possibility of a post-colonial intrusion. Could the head have been a possession of a later Spanish colonist, perhaps a Renaissance-era curiosity inspired by classical art, that accidentally found its way into the older archaeological layer? The burial was excavated in the 1930s, and while the methods were careful for their time, the chance of contamination, however small, must be considered. Another theory posits it could be an elaborate hoax planted to create a sensation. Yet, those who defend its authenticity point to the context. The head was found beneath an undisturbed pre-Hispanic floor, associated with other artifacts that firmly date the site. Later thermoluminescence dating, a technique that measures when the clay was last fired, suggested an age of around 1,800 years, though these results have been debated. The head itself shows weathering consistent with great age, and its style is not a perfect copy of any known Roman work, but rather a provincial interpretation, which some argue makes a modern forgery less likely. Beyond the debate over its origin, the head presents a deeper, more philosophical challenge to how we view the ancient world. For much of modern history, the prevailing model has been one of isolation. We have tended to see the civilizations of the Old World and the New World as developing in splendid, separate bubbles, only ruptured by the voyages of Columbus. Artifacts like this terracotta head poke holes in that model. They propose a different vision, one of a world connected by thin, fragile, but real threads. These would not have been routes of mass migration or sustained trade, but rather the rare, accidental voyages, the ships lost to storms and carried by currents to unknown shores. Such encounters would have been fleeting, perhaps even tragic, but they could have left behind a handful of artifacts, a few introduced plants, or fragments of stories that became legend. The Takaxik-Kalixtlahuaca head, therefore, is more than a curiosity. It is a symbol of possibility. It does not demand we believe in Roman colonies in Mexico. Instead, it asks us to accept that the human drive to explore has always pushed against the edges of the known map. A single ship, a single storm, a single journey of survival could have been enough to bridge two worlds we thought were separate. This small clay face resting in Mexican soil silently proposes that history is not just the story of the connections we can prove, but also of the ones that were almost made, the echoes that barely reached the other side. What does it mean for our understanding of cultural development if ideas, however faintly, could sometimes flow across the deepest waters? The head offers no definitive proof, only a persistent, quiet question etched in baked earth. That persistent question of interpretation finds its purest form in a small, dark disk of stone. In a private collection in Colombia rests an artifact known as the genetic disk, a circular piece of black lyddite stone, roughly the size of a large dinner plate and about half an inch thick. It is estimated to be over 6,000 years old, crafted by a culture long lost to history. On both of its faces, the disk is covered in an intricate array of carved symbols. To a modern observer with a basic understanding of biology, these symbols are startlingly familiar. One side appears to show a human fetus in the womb, curled in a classic fetal position. Nearby, clear carvings depict what look like sperm cells with distinct heads and trailing tails. Other sections show circles divided into parts, resembling different stages of cellular division, like mitosis, where a single cell splits to become two. The imagery is so precise that it seems to illustrate a fundamental understanding of human reproduction and cellular biology, concepts that were not formally understood by science until the invention of the microscope in the 17th century. This disk, if taken at face value, presents an intellectual thunderclap. It suggests that an ancient society possessed a sophisticated, microscopic view of life's building blocks thousands of years before the technology to see them existed. The immediate, thrilling interpretation is that this knowledge was somehow known, perhaps gained through means we cannot comprehend, and recorded in stone as a sacred or scientific text. It challenges the very timeline of biological discovery, placing a chapter of advanced understanding in a prehistoric era. Mainstream archaeology, however, offers a different, more cautious reading of the same carvings. Scholars point out that ancient art is rich with stylization and symbolism. What looks to us like a fetus could be a stylized representation of a tadpole, a seed, or a cosmological symbol representing the beginning of life in a more abstract, spiritual sense. The circles divided into segments might not be cells, but symbolic representations of the cosmos, the divisions of time, or social kinship structures. The sperm-like shapes could easily be depictions of worms, eels, or simply flowing water, a common motif in creation myths worldwide. From this perspective, the disk is not an ancient biology textbook, but a profound piece of ritual art, encoding a culture's beliefs about creation, fertility, and the cycle of life and death. This is where the artifact presents its deepest, most fascinating challenge. It forces us to confront the lens through which we view the ancient mind. Are we, as modern people steeped in a scientific worldview, projecting our own framework of cells and reproduction onto a symbolic system that operated on a completely different plane? Or are we too quick to dismiss the possibility of literal knowledge because it disrupts our comfortable historical narrative? The disc sits at the perfect intersection of these two ways of seeing. It asks us to consider whether advanced understanding must always look like our own. Could a culture develop a conceptual model of life's origins, understanding that a new being grows from a tiny, unseen beginning, and express that model through the most elegant symbols at their disposal without ever peering through a lens? Their truth might have been mythological, but it could have intuitively paralleled biological reality. The genetic disc, therefore, is not necessarily evidence of ancient microscopes. It is evidence of ancient wonder about the miracle of creation. It shows a culture attempting to visualize the invisible forces of life, to carve their understanding of how a single, tiny spark becomes a living person. In this sense, the disc is a bridge. It connects the deepest human questions of where we come from with the two languages we have used to answer them, the language of symbol and story, and the language of science and observation. They may be describing the same profound mystery, simply using different vocabularies, so the stone does not give us a clear answer about prehistoric biology. Instead, it gives us a mirror. When we look at its carved surface, do we see a reflection of ancient knowledge or a reflection of our own assumptions? It reminds us that the past speaks in a dialect we are still learning to translate, and sometimes the most advanced idea is not a technical diagram, but a timeless question etched in stone. The line between symbolic art and a record of the unknown grows even thinner in the dust of ancient Mesopotamia. From the prehistoric Ubaid culture, which flourished over 7,000 years ago in what is now Iraq, archaeologists have unearthed a collection of clay figurines that defy easy classification. These are the Ubaid Lizardmen, and their appearance is as consistent as it is unsettling. Each figure shares a set of unmistakable features: elongated heads that slope back, almond-shaped eyes that slant markedly, and most prominently, a face and body that suggest distinctly reptilian characteristics. Their postures are often human, standing upright, and many are depicted cradling infants against their chests, a pose of care and nurture that feels deeply familiar. Yet the beings themselves are utterly alien to our conventional image of early humanity. The immediate, visceral reaction to these figurines is to ask what or who they are meant to represent. In popular imagination, they have sparked waves of speculation. Could they be evidence of an ancient cult that worshipped reptilian deities, beings believed to have descended from the sky or emerged from the primordial waters? Some more speculative interpretations have even proposed they are not deities at all, but stylized representations of a non-human species, a literal record of an encounter with something other. This idea taps into a deep well of mythology, where serpent gods and dragon-like beings appear in cultures across the globe, from the Mesopotamian Mushhushu to the plumed serpents of the Americas. The Ubaid figurines, with their profound antiquity, seem to place the roots of these myths in the very dawn of civilization. Scholars of archaeology and anthropology, however, guide us toward a different, more grounded interpretation. They see in these figurines a powerful example of stylization and symbolic expression. The Ubaid culture was pre-literate, communicating complex ideas through form and ritual. The elongated heads could represent a cultural practice of cranial binding, a body modification known in many ancient societies to denote status or beauty. The slanted eyes and reptilian features might be a deliberate artistic choice to convey otherness, not of aliens but of the spiritual realm. These could be shamanistic figures representing a ritual practitioner in a trance state, taking on the attributes of a powerful animal spirit, perhaps a lizard or serpent, to bridge the human and spirit worlds. The nurturing pose holding an infant could then symbolize a protective deity of fertility or a clan ancestor, a being of power watching over the next generation. Yet, even within this academic framework, the figurines present a quiet but persistent challenge. Their features are not just slightly unusual, they are systematically and consistently reptilian across numerous examples spanning centuries. This goes beyond individual artistic whim. It suggests a shared cultural concept, a specific idea of what a powerful, perhaps supernatural, being looked like. This consistency forces us to ask deeper questions about the origins of human symbolism. Where do these potent, recurring images come from? Are they purely inventions of the human psyche, archetypes emerging from dreams and altered states of consciousness? Or could they be distant, distorted memories of something witnessed, woven into the fabric of myth over millennia? The true power of the Ubaid Lizardmen lies in this ambiguity. They resist being placed neatly in a box labeled either literal record or pure fantasy. They exist in a middle space, a blurry threshold where ritual object and potential representation meet. They do not tell us that ancient astronauts visited Mesopotamia. Instead, they tell us that the human mind, even 7,000 years ago, was capable of conceiving of the profoundly other and of giving that concept a tangible, physical form in clay. These figurines challenge us to expand our understanding of early human imagination. They remind us that our ancestors did not see the world in purely literal terms, but in layers of meaning where the animal, the human, and the divine could merge into a single, potent symbol. In their silent, slanted gaze, we are confronted with the possibility that the first stories ever told were not about ordinary people, but about beings who walked the line between the world we know and the one we can only dream of. What does it say about us that some of our oldest sculptures are not self-portraits but portraits of the unknown? The desire to memorialize the departed is a universal human impulse, but its scale can leave us speechless. High on the remote, mist-shrouded plains of the Xiang Quang Plateau in Laos, the landscape holds a secret. Scattered across hundreds of square miles, in clusters large and small, stand thousands of giant stone jars. These are not simple pots, they are monumental vessels carved from solid sandstone and granite, some reaching over 9 feet in height and weighing many tons. They stand alone or in groups, some upright, others tilted, like a gathering of silent, stoic giants forgotten by time. Dated to the Southeast Asian Iron Age, from about 500 years before the Common Era to as late as 500 after, these jars present a mystery as massive as their forms. Who made them and for what unimaginable purpose? The most widely accepted theory, supported by limited archaeological excavation, is that they were part of an elaborate burial practice. Researchers have found human remains, burial goods, and ceramic jars around some of the sites, suggesting the giant jars may have been used for a form of excarnation. This is a ceremonial practice where a body would be placed inside or perhaps on a platform near the jar, allowing the natural elements to complete their work. After a period of time, the cleansed bones could then be gathered and placed inside the jar for final interment or buried nearby. This would make the jars not tombs but transformative vessels, sacred containers for one of life's most profound passages. The concept is spiritually resonant, a ritual of returning the physical form to the earth with dignity and within a defined, monumental space. Yet, the true, staggering mystery is not just why they were made, but how. The logistical challenge is breathtaking. These jars were quarried from mountainsides several miles away from where they now stand. The society that created them, known only through these jars, had no known metal tools harder than the stone they were carving. They likely used iron chisels and hammers, but the granite they worked is brutally unforgiving. The process of roughing out a multi-ton block, then painstakingly hollowing it into a perfect, symmetrical jar shape, represents an almost unimaginable investment of labor and time. Then came the move. Transporting these colossal, fragile objects across miles of rugged, rolling plateau terrain required more than brute strength. It demanded sophisticated engineering knowledge. Researchers suggest they may have used a system of ropes, wooden rollers, and earthen ramps, coordinating large teams of people to inch each jar into its appointed place. This was not the work of a simple village. It speaks to a highly organized society with centralized leadership, specialized stoneworkers, and a shared cultural vision powerful enough to motivate generations of backbreaking effort. The jars are a testament to what a community can achieve when united by a common belief, and then they vanished. The jar makers left behind almost no other traces, no large settlements, no written records, no carvings to explain themselves. Their entire cultural identity seems distilled into these silent stone sentinels. This absence is perhaps their greatest challenge to us. We look at the jars and see an immense capability, but we see it through a veil. They force us to reconstruct a civilization from its most ambitious artifacts alone, reminding us how much of the human story is written not in words, but in enduring, physical acts of devotion. The jars do not whisper their secrets. They simply stand, holding the highland winds and centuries of silence within their hollow forms, a permanent question carved in stone about the lengths to which people will go to honor what they hold sacred. Carved into the soft sandstone walls of a secluded gorge near Gosford, Australia, a series of strange markings stare out from the bush. These are the Gosford Glyphs, over 200 Egyptian-style hieroglyphs etched into the rock, depicting scenes of ships, familiar deities like Anubis, and rows of symbols that tell a story. The narrative, as translated by some enthusiasts, is a tale of catastrophe and journey. It speaks of Egyptian explorers who sailed great distances only to meet tragedy in this strange land, with their leader dying far from the sands of home. If authentic, these carvings would be the most direct, undeniable proof of pre-Columbian contact between ancient Egypt and Australia, a discovery that would shatter the conventional map of ancient maritime history. The idea is profoundly alluring, suggesting a globe crisscrossed by adventurous pharaonic ships thousands of years before Captain Cook's arrival. The academic response, however, is unequivocal. Leading Egyptologists who have examined photographs of the glyphs identify them not as ancient but as a modern creation. The evidence they cite is detailed and technical. The hieroglyphs are a jumbled mixture of styles from different Egyptian periods, carved with a uniformity that lacks the natural variation of authentic ancient work. More damning are the grammatical errors. The inscriptions do not follow the logical syntactic rules of Egyptian writing, instead placing symbols in an order that would be nonsensical to a literate scribe. Some symbols are even inverted or anachronistic, drawn from a modern understanding of hieroglyphic dictionaries rather than from the living tradition of the craft. The consensus is that the glyphs were likely carved in the latter half of the 20th century, possibly by a local resident with an interest in Egyptology, a creative act that slowly transformed into an archaeological mystery. Yet, despite this definitive scholarly dismissal, the Gosford Glyphs refuse to fade into obscurity. They have taken root in popular culture, featured in documentaries, books, and countless online discussions. Their persistence highlights a deep and powerful human desire, the longing for a more connected, more adventurous ancient world. They represent a rebellion against the sometimes sterile narrative of historical isolationism, the idea that cultures developed in total separation until a specific date of discovery. For many, the official explanation feels insufficient, even dismissive. The glyphs offer a tangible, physical site where one can stand and feel the thrill of a hidden history, a story more epic than the textbooks allow. This tension makes them a perfect case study in how the past is interpreted. They test the fragile line between amateur enthusiasm and archaeological fraud, between a wishful projection and a genuine, misinterpreted relic. Ultimately, the Gosford Glyphs challenge us less about ancient Egyptian sailors and more about our own relationship with history. They are a monument not to pharaohs but to the power of narrative. We are storytellers by nature, and a blank stone wall is a compelling canvas. The glyphs show how a physical creation, regardless of its true origin, can become a vessel for our collective imaginations, a focal point for questions about who we are and where we come from. They remind us that the artifacts that captivate us the most are often those that speak to our hopes for the past, hopes for a world more curious, more daring, and more interconnected than we have been led to believe. The real mystery of Gosford may not be who carved the symbols, but why we so desperately want them to be real. The sea holds its secrets close, and none more dramatically than the one resting off the coast of Japan's southernmost island. In the clear, blue waters near Yonaguni, a local diver in the 1980s discovered a site that seemed to defy the ocean itself. Rising from the seabed over 80 feet below the surface was not a reef or a random rock pile, but a colossal, geometric structure. The Yonaguni Monument, as it is now known, is a sprawling complex of massive sandstone blocks, forming what appear to be vast, flat terraces, sharp 90-degree angles, and perfectly straight steps ascending like a sunken staircase. One face of the formation even bears a striking resemblance to a carved human face, complete with what looks like eyes and a mouth. It is a site so orderly, so architectural, that the mind immediately rejects the idea of random chance. The debate over this underwater giant is a fundamental clash of perspectives. Most geologists point to the powerful natural forces at work in the region. The sandstone here is prone to fracturing along straight lines due to tectonic stress. Relentless tidal currents, acting over thousands of years, could have eroded the rock along these natural fault lines, sculpting the flat plains, steps, and terraces through entirely natural processes. The seeming face could be a classic example of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see familiar patterns, especially human ones, in random shapes. From this scientific viewpoint, Yonaguni is a magnificent natural sculpture, a testament to the patient, unconscious artistry of Earth's own movements. Yet, for those who study the site, the sheer accumulation of regular features pushes against a purely natural explanation. The monument displays multiple tiers of terraces, all level and aligned. There are two prominent parallel pillars rising near the top. Most compellingly, there is a triangular opening that looks deliberately carved, and a channel that seems too straight and purposeful to be the work of random erosion. If even a portion of this was shaped by human hands, the implications are as deep as the water that covers it. The structure sits at a depth that would have been above sea level during the last ice age, when global water levels were hundreds of feet lower. This opens the door to a haunting possibility. Could Yonaguni be a remnant of a coastal civilization, a ceremonial platform, or even part of a settlement that was swallowed by the rising oceans as the glaciers melted over 10,000 years ago? This is the profound challenge the Yonaguni Monument presents. It forces us to refine our very definition of an artifact. An artifact is typically an object, something portable, clearly shaped by human intention. But what about a landscape? Where do we draw the line between a place humans merely used and a place they fundamentally reshaped? Yonaguni sits in that ambiguous zone, a gray area between a natural wonder and a human-made one. It asks us to develop a new kind of vision, to look at a formation and discern not just how it could have formed, but whether the patterns we see cross a threshold from interesting coincidence to deliberate design. The monument does more than question a single site. It points our imagination to the vast, unexplored canvas of the continental shelves. If a structure of this scale could be hidden just off the coast of Japan, what other chapters of human history lie submerged, waiting on the ocean floor? Our species has always lived near water, and coastlines have always been centers of culture and innovation. The rising seas at the end of the last ice age didn't just change the map, they may have erased the very homes of our ancestors, sinking their stories beneath the waves. Yonaguni stands as a potential beacon, a silent, stony clue that the most significant archaeological sites of all might not be in deserts or jungles, but under the quiet, dark pressure of the sea. It is a reminder that the past is not always buried. Sometimes it is simply drowned, holding its breath until we are ready to look. 25 objects now lie before us, a collection of silent witnesses from the forgotten edges of time. They are made of stone and metal, clay and parchment, each one a question mark given physical form. We began with a clockwork model of the cosmos pulled from a shipwreck and ended with a sunken monument that may be a natural sculpture or a drowned city. In between, we encountered maps of ice-free continents, batteries in clay pots, and faces carved in styles from across the world. Some of these artifacts have likely explanations within our current understanding, while others stubbornly resist any easy classification. Yet, regardless of where they ultimately land on the spectrum from mundane to miraculous, together they form a powerful testament to one undeniable truth. The story of humanity is far richer, far more complex, and far more mysterious than any single narrative can contain. What emerges from this journey is not a new, definitive history to replace the old one. That would be just another closed book. Instead, a more profound pattern comes into focus. History is not a destination we have reached, but a living, breathing dialogue. It is a continuous conversation between the physical evidence we pull from the earth and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we came from. Every time a farmer's plow strikes a strange coin or a diver's light illuminates a submerged step, that conversation is renewed. These artifacts are the questions posed to us by the past. They do not always provide answers, but they relentlessly challenge our assumptions. They challenge the comforting linearity of progress, that simple arrow pointing from primitive to advanced. The Antikythera Mechanism shows us sophistication that vanished for over a millennium. The Baghdad Battery hints at a practical understanding of a force that would not be formally harnessed for 2,000 years. These are not neat steps on a staircase, but flashes of brilliance that appear, flicker, and are sometimes lost, reminding us that knowledge is not a permanent possession but a fragile flame that must be tended. They challenge the myth of isolation, the Maine Penny in a Native American shell heap, the Roman-style head in a Mexican burial, the Fuente Magna bowl with its alien script. These objects whisper of tenuous, fleeting connections across vast oceans and continents. They suggest a world where, long before globalization, the most curious and courageous among us occasionally breached the horizons, leaving behind traces so faint we can barely perceive them. Our ancestors may have been more connected, even sporadically, than our maps of separate, parallel civilizations allow, and perhaps most importantly, they challenge our own intellectual humility. The true value of these enduring mysteries may not lie in proving that ancient astronauts built the pyramids or that a super-civilization flourished in the Paleozoic. Their greatest gift is that they refuse to let us become complacent. They force archaeologists, historians, and all of us to sharpen our tools, to question our methodologies, and to remain open to surprise. A mystery like the Voynich Manuscript is a gauntlet thrown down to cryptographers and linguists, pushing the boundaries of their fields. The debate over Yonaguni forces geologists and archaeologists to refine their very definitions of natural and human-made. These puzzles are the engines of inquiry. So, what do we do with these 25 extraordinary challenges? We do not accept every wild theory uncritically, for skepticism is the guardian of truth. But neither do we dismiss every anomaly out of hand, for that is the death of discovery. We hold the tension. We allow the London Hammer and the Aiud Artifact to remind us to check our contexts with extreme care. We let the Nazca Lines and the stone spheres of Costa Rica expand our understanding of what ancient societies were capable of achieving with communal will and profound vision. We listen to the quiet insistence of the Maine Penny and the Kensington Runestone, which suggest that the human drive to explore is older and more persistent than our textbooks often record. In the end, this collection of enigmas offers us a choice. We can see the past as a locked room, its contents already catalogued and understood, or we can see it as a vast, dimly lit library, where we have only read a few of the volumes on the easiest-to-reach shelves. The artifacts we have explored are like pages torn from other books, scattered on the floor. Some pages we can place with confidence, others remain frustratingly obscure, their text in a language we have not yet deciphered. But they all prove one exhilarating thing. The library is much, much larger than we thought. The story is still being written, and every new discovery, every persistent mystery, invites us to turn the page and keep reading. From the cosmic calculator of Antikythera to the submerged steppes of Yonaguni, these 25 artifacts collectively whisper a tantalizing possibility. Our ancient world was far more complex, interconnected, and technologically curious than we often give it credit for. The journey through these objects does not demand we believe in impossible fantasies or forgotten super-civilizations. Instead, it asks for something more profound, a shift in perspective. It asks us to replace a simple timeline with a rich, mysterious landscape, where human ingenuity flickered in unexpected places and connections were spun across distances we thought impassable. While not every mystery signifies a lost advanced society, each one serves as a crucial puzzle piece, challenging the complacency that can settle over historical study. They are the anomalies that keep the story alive, the questions that prevent the past from becoming a static, closed book. These objects invite us to look beyond the clean narratives of textbook timelines and consider the vast, unknown chapters that lie buried in river mud, sealed in stone, or forgotten at the bottom of the sea. They remind us that history is not just the record of what survived, but also the haunting echo of what was lost, what was almost understood, and what was dreamed. If this exploration has sparked your curiosity to look at the world with wider eyes, to question the stories we've been told, then this is only the beginning. The journey into history's greatest enigmas continues with every new discovery and every re-examined artifact. To delve deeper, consider subscribing for more voyages into the shadows of our shared past. And we would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Which of these 25 artifacts challenges your own world-view the most? Which mystery makes you stop and wonder what else might be waiting, silent, for its story to be told? Remember, the past is not just what we already know. It is all we have yet to discover.